have you been programming with TIFF?
I've been leading the Midnight Madness program since 2017, but before that I worked as the programming associate for Colin Geddes, who had previously done the Midnight Madness section for 20 years, and I so yeah, I'm still early in my tenure as the lead curator for Midnight, but I've been programming for much of my life, my adult life, probably since I was 19 years old with the Toronto After Dark Film Festival.
Oh,
Um, yeah.
no, that's cool. This is actually a really great place to start. I wanted to start off by getting hearing more about you and your history with programming, which you just explained, but also just like your involvement with the film industry and like what got you into this.
I mean, I always wanted to, I was always, I was a movie kid. I liked movies. That was my personality. To quote the Chandler Levac movie, that played TIFF last
Oh
year.
yes, yes, yes. I had a chance to talk with her a few months ago. She's delightful, wonderful,
Chandler's great.
wonderful
She's a good
filmmaker.
friend.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, so I liked movies and wanted to work in film, and but even before I left high school, when I thought retrospectively about it, like I was always the kid that would find stuff in Chinatown, bring it to school, and then ask a teacher if instead of going out for lunch, we could just wheel a TV into the economics room and watch John Woo's The Killer or Troy Hart's Speaking Opera Blues or something like that. So I was always showing, like showing people movies, and yeah, just very organically, I started attending film festivals. Fantasia in Montreal was the first
hmm
festival I ever attended, and then we started going to Midnight Madness in 2004, 2005, and I think Xiao SPL or Killzone was the first Midnight Madness film I ever saw, and was just completely floored by it, and saw Colin on stage and realized, oh, this is actually a job. Someone gets to do this. This is what I already have been doing with my friends.
Right.
And so, I was, I worked for the Bloor Cinema as just a concessions guy, but I also was part of a film student union at the University of Toronto. And then there just were opportunities to show movies, and I would just take them. And then Adam Lopez was starting the Toronto After Dark Film Festival. He was just someone who was frequenting Bloor Cinema. So I spoke to him about my interest and passion, and I got involved. And again, Colin Geddes noticed me because I was frequently forewalling the Bloor Cinema with screenings of Troll 2 and other sort of genre films and cult films. I was renting prints of Mr. Vampire 3 and screening them at the Bloor. And so that's sort of what brought me into his circle. And it's a total privilege that I am where I am now, because I was just such a fan of Midnight Madness. I always treated it as the sort of state of the union of both genre films, but like cult cinema in general. Like these 10 films I felt were always dictating what the future of various genres were, be it action or horror, because it felt like this was the section that was sort of championing the more innovative works in those sections, films that were kind of like an intersection of like genre but also avant-garde, because they were doing things that were new and that were unpredictable and people hadn't seen before. And so that's how I always treated the section, and religiously would attend those screenings, and feel blessed that at a certain point I got involved with the festival properly. And then they asked me when Colin was retiring for me to step into his huge shoes, to take over.
That's so cool. What a progression in the industry to get to where you are now. That's really awesome. Um, I was thinking about this before we hopped on about the magnitude of the kind of job that this is, narrowing the number of, I'm sure, totally
Yeah.
qualified films down to 10.
Oh,
Um,
it's agonizing.
yes, tell me more about that and your process and how you go about that.
Yeah, so I mean, on average, I'm looking at about 350 features, and that's probably just purely uh and honestly, this year it wasn't even purely submissions. A lot of people clicked off the Midnight Madness box, and so I have to say that this was the first year I was working with a pre-screener, Adam Bovalentis, who works with a local festival, the Insomniac Film Festival, and
Mhm.
whose programming I've been really interested in. And so I actually brought him onto the pre-screening team this year. The first time I've ever actually had a dedicated pre-screener within the festival. I also use a guy named Chad Herbal, who's based in Washington, who's kind of like my programmer scout almost. He's like always just scanning IMDb for me and checking the MPA rating systems, because that can be a handy thing to discover. Like, is a film ready? And then you're like, hey, has the MPA rated it yet? They've rated it yet. It's ready. Let's send an email. Let's find out. Like these are some of the hacks that we sometimes use.
Sorry,
But
really quick. You said he's in Washington. Is that what you said?
yeah, I think he's based in Washington D.C.
DC. Okay, I'm in Seattle, and so I have to
Oh,
differentiate
okay.
when
Yeah,
I'm talking
sorry.
with someone on the East Coast. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So Washington DC. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's sort of a bit of my team, and I have friends in the genre community that are always, hey, I heard about this film, or relying on my little birds to tell me what's out there. But then then it's just sort of dealing with what's in front of me, and I never, I've rarely gone into a year where I've been like, this is a goal. Like, I want to get this film, I want to get that film. I kind of because that I find just either let you disappoint yourself because you kind of put all your eggs in the basket of trying to find something. I do try to kind of accept what comes my way, but I'm always trying to see more and more and see as much as possible before I have to make any decisions. But it's tricky when you're working with a festival as big as TIFF. You often don't have time to see everything and then make your decisions. So you're often making rolling decisions as you're watching stuff, just so that you don't get to the end and then have to invite every film all at once and becomes a huge bottleneck. So it is a challenging process, and invariably through the process I am going to lose films that I love, that I think are great, they're cool movies, and I wish I could include them in the festival. And it's just not possible. But what the biggest goal that I have, and this is something that Colin really drilled into me when I was working under him, which is that you can't deliver the same experience every night. And the audience doesn't want that either. Midnight Madness should be a buffet of different flavors of midnight cinema, and so that's something that's very important to me. And so I do try to have that be kind of a rule of thumb. It's also been really important to me to try and because this was something that struck me about the section when I first started enjoying it, was that it was like a gateway to discovering other national cinemas. And so it's always very important for me that the lineup is not the majority of the lineup is not English language, or is not all from Western countries. I really do try to see if I can find a good spread of the world, because I really do feel like it's a global section, and that has been very important. And I was very happy this year that I have two countries, Serbia and Saudi Arabia, that have never been represented in the midnight section, that have an opportunity to, because and they're two of, I think, one of the most exciting films in the section too, because they're coming in with very little baggage, so people really don't know what to expect. And to me, that's always the best Midnight Madness experience, is when an audience is coming in that unprepared.
Absolutely. That certainly stands out to me when I look at the Midnight Madness program, is how it's a very eclectic mix of types of films that are coming in, which answered one of my questions, because I was curious about what you look at when programming the lineup as a whole. But I also kind of want to know what you look at when it comes to individual films. Like you said, it's really hard to narrow down all of these
Yeah.
movies down to 10. So when you are making those rolling decisions, what is it that captures your attention about a film and says, this is something that I need to either keep on the top of my list, or that I really want to program? What is it about that in individual films?
I mean, there's very contradictory ingredients depending on the kind of movie it is, because on the one hand, you can have a midnight movie it's all about momentum. Because that's so important. These films are starting at midnight. I want this movie to wire the audience quickly, and so there needs to be a blistering momentum sometimes. But at the other times, you if you look in the history of midnight cinema, I mean, like David Lynch's Eraserhead is not a fast movie. It's a movie that is measured, that is strange, that is slow, but it's atmospheric, it's hypnotic. So if it is going to be slow, which I think totally has its place in midnight cinema, I then look for, like, what's the atmosphere like? What's the kind of the tone? Is there an identity to the filmmaking that feels new, that I haven't encountered something like this before, where the aesthetic just feels so new? I mean, Harmony Korine is certainly an established filmmaker. I think his experiments with Agrodrift, he's able to, I think, comfortably experiment because the audience kind of knows what they're getting into. So I'm really excited to show something like Agrodrift because I feel like it's a film that's definitely more measured in its pacing, it's more poetic in its plotting. But if the film was coming without the brand of Harmony Korine, I'd be concerned with whether an audience would be ready for it or would be willing to go out on that limb. And I feel very confident that people are going to have that are just going to be kind of mesmerized by this movie. But yeah, I mean, I just always look for something that surprises me. I've seen a lot of genre films and a lot of midnight movies and a lot of films that have cult audiences, and I know that the audience coming to Midnight Madness is a very experienced audience for the most part. They're very learned. They themselves are fans of these movies and watch and consume a lot of cinema, and so I know that they are they are looking to be surprised and to see something we haven't seen before. And so I sometimes it boils down to interesting decisions where if it's a decision that feels new, be it aesthetic, be it on the level of storytelling or character, and that's why sometimes that's why I love finding films from bringing new countries into the section, because I often find that sometimes you'll see a country take a familiar story and inject their own cultural perspective to it, and it becomes something that you haven't seen before. It becomes something new. A film like Naga from Saudi Arabia is in the pantheon of like one crazy night movies like the Safdie's Good Times or Scorsese's After Hours, and yet because of its cultural context and because of the perspective of its female protagonist, I think it delivers a very, very new experience, particularly for Western filmgoers, that I think is really interesting and really exciting. And I think it also just demonstrates a very auspicious start to a career for Michel Aljazer, who I really can't wait to see what he does next. I think this movie Naga is particularly going to blow people away. I think that of all the films in my lineup, it actually has another ingredient that I always look for, is that first 10 minutes. Like, is there something in that first 10 minutes that make people go like, what am I watching? Wow. And Naga delivers that. Naga has such a striking opening, and that I would definitely recommend anyone who knows how to, if you want to capture people's attention, that's a movie that absolutely gets into it really quickly and really effectively.
Oh, that's so exciting. Naga definitely stood out to me. That was one that I was ranking really high on movies that I really want to see, especially like at the midnight screening. So yes, I appreciate that insight. That's going to be really cool to experience at the festival. It's interesting because we're talking about genre film, and obviously within the community that appreciates genre film. These are very significant films. These are very important. They're really great experiences in the theater. But I feel like the industry in general um, doesn't have the best perception of genre film. Like they're always overlooked during award seasons. And so I think about this and I wonder, from your perspective as an insider in the industry, what is the significance of Midnight Madness to TIFF, but also to the film industry as a whole?
Well, that's a great question, because I actually think, in my opinion, and I know this is shared by others. I know Pierce Handling, former CEO of TIFF, actually, he said this to me as well. I really believe that Midnight Madness was the first section when it was inaugurated in the late 80s by Noah Cowan. It was the first time an institutional festival, or granted a real film institution, took midnight movies seriously. Midnight cinema had been around for, arguably since the 70s with Ben Barenholtz and the Elgin, where it was just a really great economic model to make money on movies that had cult audiences, and that was changed the game, at least in the West, exhibition wise. But Midnight Madness was kind of the first time where someone was curating midnight movies. Festivals had done midnight screenings, but where they were really trying to curate a class of and mode of filmmaking that was sort of designated midnight cinema. And I do think over the years, and now not there's not a single like A-tier festival that doesn't have a midnight program for the most part. Cannes has one, Sundance has one, and what I think has been what has occurred though is that I do actually think Midnight Madness is one of the best markets of TIFF, because I think the industry does recognize that these films, as strange as they are, they get an audience reaction. The audience reacts to the movie in, I think, a very profound way. And so I think I frequently actually now am getting a lot of industry, wanting to learn more about the filmmakers that are in midnight sections. I think there's midnight movies and genre movies are great conduit for emerging filmmakers to get established, because I think these are movies that if they can prove they can get a reaction from an audience, suddenly Hollywood is very interested in that. And it's true, they get shut out of the awards conversation, but I think these are also movies that are doing very well at the box office. And I do feel I felt proud of the acquisitions that have occurred in the Midnight Madness section in recent years. So I definitely, when even going into programming it, I do recognize this is a section that is actually getting a lot of buyer interest and buyer attention. And so I'm always excited to feature sales titles in the section and give them that platform. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to the Academy Awards, sure, it's a section that but hey, we've got Dick's the Musical, so maybe we've got a best original song nomination coming, which we were denied last year from Weird the Al Yankovic Story, because true. Roku did not screen the film in the minimum number of venues theatrically. so because otherwise I felt like we would have had that in the bag first, one of the first Midnight Madness wins at midnight. But maybe Dick's the Musical this year. The songs are pretty great.
Fingers crossed. That's another one that ranks really high as one that I'm excited to see. And I think Regal is actually promoting it. I've seen I think the poster came out, and I've seen posts with Regal Cinema.
It is an A24 film, so it is certainly going to get a very strong release.
Yes, for sure. I was actually, one thing I wanted to mention was I was really excited when Sisu released. Regal did a mystery movie thing where Sisu was one of those mystery movies, and so I took some friends, and that ended up being the movie, and I was just like, yes, you guys just don't even know yet.
Awesome.
No, it's really cool, and so it was fun to be able to see that at TIFF. And
I hope the Indian film they have this year, which is Kill, Nikhil Bhatt's Kill, which is kind of in the Sisu slot, like it's on the first Friday, and it's like, guys, you are not prepared. This is crazy wild action, super gnarly. But also what's exciting industry wise is that it's a film that's coming from India with no sales attachments. It's very rare. Often Indian films are very frequently pre-sold, especially in their domestic market. And this is a film that is wide open for the world. It doesn't have a deal with Netflix or Amazon yet. And so I'm really excited to see, if a Lionsgate or a company like that steps up, and with the success of RRR last year, which I should have realized. No, RRR still would have probably beat Weird Al, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a good
so maybe it was for the best. Maybe it was for the best. but though still, I would have loved to see Weird Al on stage with the RRR team.
That would have been fun.
But I do think I'm really excited to see how the industry responds to this film, and if maybe Regal will do a mystery screening next year, and it'll be Kill, which will be show a Indian action movie that I just think is terrific. I'm really excited to have in the program.
All for it. I cannot wait. I feel like it's important to probably address the thing that's disrupting the industry most at this point, which is, of course, the writers and actors strike. I was curious, maybe from your perspective, how that affects programming at TIFF, the festival going on, a lot of uncertainty with the industry. What is your perspective on that?
My personal perspective was that, I mean, it didn't affect me that much. There was an initial week of uncertainty, but at the end of the day, a lot of the lineup I was looking at was largely international titles. Certainly have a few titles where SAG actors will be affected, but I don't believe any of the films are actually with struck companies. And so as I understand it, the filmmakers are pursuing interim agreements to see if their actors are able to support their films. And I totally stand behind both actors and even filmmakers who decide that this is not the right moment to support their films. But the films that have decided to participate in the section, I'm really happy with the slate as it formed, and I'm also really confident that the audience is not only coming for the films, and they're not only coming for the talent, they're coming for the audience, and that
Mm-hmm.
audience is definitely going to be there.
Right.
And that's an audience that I think is an essential ingredient of the Midnight Madness experience, perhaps the essential ingredient
Yes.
of the Midnight Madness experience. Therefore, personally, within my section, I felt very confident, very positive that this is still going to be a really terrific celebration of cinema. But I mean, you will notice if the strike affected me in any way, I am playing a movie called Working Class Goes to Hell
You are.
about a
That's
labor
true.
union that is very frustrated that its employers just will not do the right thing, that they are pushed to Satanism.
Right.
So
It's so timely.
it was on my mind when I was putting this lineup together. I was thinking about it insofar that I included that title. And I'm glad I did. I also feel like for anyone who has missed the Vanguard program at TIFF, Working Class Goes to Hell is a bullseye Vanguard movie. But I also think it's going to play terrific at midnight because it's very funny. And there is also moments of total unease and dread. But I also just think it gets so absurd in certain points. But also, I just think it's stirring. I really do think the trajectory the movie takes is one of reminding people that sometimes the only salvation is other than a good sense of humor is worker solidarity, and that's a
Yeah,
theme I can get behind.
that's awesome. Very, very cool. How timely of that. um, so I was curious, are there any, when it comes to Midnight Madness, are there any common misconceptions that you spend every year trying to like correct or debunk or like spread
Yeah,
awareness for?
frequently I'll be like, "You can come check out any midnight films," to a friend or a family, more often maybe with a family member, and they'll be like, I don't want to watch horror movies, and I'm like,
Oh
they're not all
no.
horror movies. They're not all horror movies, and that's the biggest misconception. It was a misconception when Colin was running the section. It's one that I deal with, and it's funny because I'll sometimes get it from both sides where it'll be like, there's too many horror movies or there's not enough horror movies, and then I'll have to remind the person who says that there are too many that actually there's a lot of stuff that is totally not going to traumatize you.
Right.
And then I return to the other person and go, actually, some of the films that you don't think are horror movies are more horror movies than you think. In a lineup like this, I'm very happy with regards to the diversity of genre, and to the different spectrum of genre and cult cinema and midnight film, because I really feel like I'm hitting a lot of different tones. I think there's scary horror like in Sleep and
Yes.
When Evil Lurks. That's the stuff that might be a little bit more traumatic. Naga, though, it's a one crazy night thriller, but it doesn't at a certain point actually dip into something that I would define as creature feature territory.
Very
That is
cool.
really cool and really really fun and really exciting. There's martial arts films for the action junkies, but these martial art films also something for the horror fans because they are gory. They are like, wow, like, oh man. But there's two types of gory. There's kills gory, which is more like The Raid, where it's like
Right.
super violent and you're like, oh my god, I gotta actually like cover my eyes as he's using that fire extinguisher in a creative way. um and then there's stuff like Boy Kills World, which is definitely more broad, more comic book. The violence is a little bit sillier, though I will warn audiences that if you thought the use of a cheese grater in Evil Dead Rise was bad, there's a cheese grater in Boy Kills World, and that might be a trigger, a trigger warning for
Right.
folks that are easily queasy. But then Hell of a Summer, I think, is like just really endearing, funny comedy horror. This is a horror film that you could take your mom to, and she would have a fun time with, because
Oh,
it's
nice.
more about how endearing the characters are, and it's sort of a nostalgic throwback to both the slashers of the 80s, but also sort of the sort of self-reflexive slashers of the 90s. and then I've got a freaking musical, which is just like
Mhm.
going to be great times. It's unapologetically queer and just so much fun and very infectious. And any Broadway lover is going to have a blast. And I'm so excited to be showing this at the Royal Alex because it's like a venue for
Yeah.
Broadway shows. So I just think it's going to be a perfect night. Really excited for that. Riddle of Fire is basically like you could bring your kids to Riddle of Fire. Like Riddle of
That's
Fire is
awesome.
just a wackadoo children's film, and children's films have had a history at Midnight Madness, from A Town Called Panic, Big Game, because I do feel like sometimes children, family films in quotations are
Mhm.
movies that I think can be so deeply eccentric, and I do think the Midnight Madness audience is going to have a blast with Riddle of Fire because it's also a film absolutely in conversation with cult cinema. I won't spoil which films, but there are some very, very obvious needle drops that I think are just going to make people grin. So I'm really excited. I really think this lineup has something for every kind of midnight personality this year.
That's so cool. That's so
So I
cool.
don't want to hear. I don't want to hear that you're not coming to Midnight Madness
From no one.
because it's too scary.
There's
Because
something
I
for
do
everyone.
I do have options. I do have options for you.
That's so cool. I have to wrap up. But I had one more question
Sure.
with us as of this recording being a month away from opening day of TIFF. How are you feeling about it? How's preparations coming? How are things going at this point?
I mean, we're in the eye of the storm because I've locked the lineup, I've announced the lineup. I'm
Yeah.
taking a beat for myself, and then I'll start ramping up whatever sort of hijinks and theatrics I'll get to on stage. I always like to have some, whether it's a costume change or whether it's some other kind of stage business. I'm talking with the stakeholders too, seeing how other ways that we can really eventize and make the experience even more special. So I'm always trying to do that. There's nothing I can report at this stage, but that's
Yeah.
sort of my main priority is, okay, now I have the movies. How can I add and make the experience even more entertaining and exciting, and just spread the word and promote and let people know and talk to all those people that don't think that they want to see a Midnight Madness movie, and actually
Mhm.
go, well, listen, do you like going to rock concerts? Because that's Midnight Madness. Like Midnight Madness is like it's a real concert atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm very excited. We're a month away, and I really appreciate you talking with me about the Midnight Madness program and your role at TIFF and everything. This has been a great conversation, Peter. Thank you so much for this.
It's an absolute pleasure. I look forward to seeing you in the audience
Yeah.
this September.